Why you're not getting better at art. The truth is, if you're here, then you probably are. Just not at the speed you'd like. I wanted to talk about this because I feel like there's a lot of videos that will come and tell you that there's just this one hack or trick that will fix everything. Or that if you just buy their course, then you too will become great. Predicated on the idea that you just have to stick to their plan and that purchasing it is the equivalent of practice. But I was recently watching a video from this YouTuber and he had an insight that I found really resonated with me. And I'm paraphrasing here. Essentially what it is a lot of the time people will sell you this thing that they advertise as a shortcut to success, wanting you to ignore or just not even consider the years of work and effort it took for them to get to that point. And then when you kind of half-ass it because equated buying the course to putting in the work, you begin to wonder, why isn't it working out? I wanted to make this because I wanted to recontextualize the subject in terms of art, as it has a very similar progression structure to the fitness industry, at least I find anyway, as it is largely self-taught and self-motivated, with maybe slightly less steroids involved. The truth is, there's no shortcut to mastery. Never has been, and never will be, probably. I could eat my words later in life, but who knows. And sure, there are better ways to learn than others, but nothing, and I truly mean nothing, beats consistency. I'm sure most of you heard the phrase 10,000 hours. 10,000 hours to master something. That's 417 days, 60 weeks, or 1.25 years of time dedicated to a single activity with intent and focus for every single second of that time. I've been fortunate enough to find 2 interests that I loved, that enthralled me to the point of where I sort of hyperfixated on them. One of them for years. And as a result, I got pretty fucking good. I dedicated 8 years of my life, give or take, with varying degrees of intensity to Muay Thai. I was lucky. The place and people I trained with were an excellent learning environment. And to me, it's probably one of the most honest sports out there, because it becomes very, very apparent, very, very fast when you're shit. And here's the thing, I never became a champion, but I had the privilege of training with a lot of people who did, or currently are on the path to becoming one. Some even at an international level. And what I noticed was you could always see who had it. You could always tell who was going to succeed. It was obvious to me, and the reason why is simple really. These guys were training 9 times a week, consistently, for years straight, with regular competition. Always pushing themselves to be better, to improve, because if they didn't, the consequences were that they'd get their shit kicked in. It was simply showing up every day and wanting to learn. Let me try and put this in more constrained terms. I'm going to take a random stab and assume that a lot of the folks watching this, all 7 of you, have played RuneScape. The more you do an activity, the more your skill level goes up. But the amount of time that passes is actually irrelevant. All that matters is the amount of time you put into the skill. So getting good at anything takes time, patience, and it takes effort. That being said, we live in a world where our attention span is getting fucked 6 ways to Sunday by some of the most intelligent people on the planet with nigh on infinite resources. But if you understand the mechanism behind it, you can actually get it to work in your favor. I wanted to share a few things that I found really helped me stick to art. Ways that made the actual act of practicing easier. I want to preface, this is not peer-reviewed science, merely anecdotal evidence of my own experience. Straight from the dome, as it were. But hey, I'm sure it applies to most folk. So, what is the mechanism? Well, it's simple really. The trick is to reduce the number of things between you and consciously having to do something. Making a path of least resistance that's equal to taking your phone out of your pocket and scrolling. For example, say you want to draw every day. What do you actually think is the easiest way to make sure you can do that? I'll give you a hint. It's not to schedule an hour every evening and then to get depressed when you just don't stick to practicing it, all 7 hours, 7 times a week. For me, I've got a couple tricks that I find really help me keep that consistency. 3 to be exact. The first one is, and I'm sure quite a few people have probably heard this already, is making shit art. I believe that's a quote popularized by Dan Harmon. And I guess the general idea is that it's okay, you're not good. Not yet. Sometimes I find we have a mental block of thinking everything needs to be perfect. But this actually ends up being detrimental to the pursuit of perfection anyway. The more you do something, the better you get, and therefore the closer to perfection you get. Once you realize this, the desire for perfection almost gets out of its own way, because it has now become detrimental to its own goal. The second trick is the path of least resistance. I take a sketchbook with me everywhere. Alone, with friends, in a cafe, public transport, at work. I find it's just a really nice way to pass the time instead of looking at my phone. And to be performative for all the pretty women that I am never going to talk to. See, it's double the incentive. You get better at art while also feeling better than everyone else because I'm not looking at my phone. So I'm clearly enlightened and in no way deeply flawed. Third one is to leave a sketchbook and a pen at your bedside table. You might find that instead of scrolling, you just want to draw some lines. Or maybe you just want to watch YouTube and draw at the same time. You can actually just do both. It's not a big deal. Two things can be true at once. Again, it's just this thing of that path of least resistance. The less conscious thought that goes into starting an action, the easier it is to do it. Instead of setting up a schedule and saying, I'm going to draw an hour every day, you just pick up a sketchbook for a bit and decide, okay, that's enough whenever you feel like it. And in doing so, you kind of change your mental relationship with the act from that of a chore to just that of a pastime. And I think that's one of the reasons why I just really love the physical medium of drawing, because there's nothing between you and that pen and paper. Lastly, there's a couple of things you can do to make your screen time less addicting. Color filters to black and white on the phone. It's a simple triple tap on the iPhone, and I'm sure there's settings on Android as well that do the same thing, he says, unsure. Another one is distraction for YouTube. It's a great tool. I'm sure there's other options, or other similar options to it as well. It just lets you turn off parts of YouTube, to the point where it's only a search bar. I find that when you recognize you're going down a hole, you can just flick it off to a singular search bar, and you kind of close that mental loop that you get stuck in. And curating your subscriptions and feeds is also pretty helpful. Just being aware of what it is you actually want to watch and trying to push the algorithm towards that more. It's kind of fucked in a way, to be honest. At least for me anyway, trying to be a YouTuber, I suppose. Well, also advising you on how to stop it from being so addicting. But, hey, the world and people are ever full of contradiction. I guess I just hope that the stuff I make has a bit of meaningful value and use. So for me, just to cap it off, I found that when you start to take a multi-method approach with more than one route to the goal, you're just more likely to get it done. And it's just easier, because there's just less decision paralysis. Finally, there's one other thing I think I should bring up, and that is the basics of drawing. Again, I want to preface this, I'm a mediocre artist. Fortunately though, I know some people that are incredible at it. And I also know how to get good at things. I see a lot of tutorials that will talk about perspective techniques, figure and gesture drawing, simple shape building exercises, which is all well and good, but recently my friend gifted me this book called Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain by Betty Edwards, and it completely changed the way I think about art. The art book doesn't teach you how to draw per se. Rather, it teaches you how to see and how to better understand how your body sees, which I don't really think is something prevalent in the main discourse of art YouTube, at least not from what I've seen. A lot of the time, I think when artists start out, we assume it's all technique based. But your body and brain also work in specific ways, meaning that some techniques will work with it, and some will work against it. Let me explain. The book covers the basics of drawing from a neuroscience perspective, and how you either are drawing with the left side or the right side of your brain. Spoiler, one is good, and the other one actively makes it harder. While still being very easy and enjoyable to read, with some exercises to help you apply these techniques. It covers a lot. I'm not going to go into too much detail because Betty explains it more comprehensively than I ever could. I actually don't know if I should call her by her first name. It feels too personal, doesn't it? Because Betty Edwards? Yeah, let's do that. Explains it more comprehensively than I ever could. So, if by the end of this strikes a chord, I'd recommend you get a copy. It really changed the way I fundamentally think about drawing, and it just made me understand how my body understands drawing. There's a few things it recommends you to get to best execute the exercises, but you can honestly just do fine with a pen and paper. The main thing for me is this introduction of the idea of symbols. Think about a hand, and try and draw one. A lot of you probably drew something like this, maybe a circle with 5 lines, which is something that you've probably drawn a lot as a child, because that's the symbol that you've learned to represent the hand, rather than learning how to perceive the lines and negative shadow shapes that actually make up the hand. So how do we get around this? Well, a really good way is to draw upside down. When you try and draw a human, your left and right side of the brain will usually clash. What I mean by this is when you try and draw what you perceive as a hand, you will actively be fighting against drawing the symbol of the hand at the same time, which is why it always feels so wrong. But if you draw the shape upside down, the symbols you've come to associate with the body, the head, the legs, the hands, the eyes, the nose, the mouth, etc., don't clash so much with your actual perception, making it a lot easier to just draw what you see. And the more you do it, and understand the mechanisms behind it, the better you'll get, and the more you learn to draw with the right side of the brain. Obviously, there's a lot more in the book. I touched briefly on shadow shapes and negative shapes, etc., and anchor points, and they go really, really in depth into this as well. And it just really explained a lot of concepts that I think instinctually I already knew to an extent, or had been exposed to, but never before had I put it in such an eloquent and well thought out manner. But I'm not an education channel. Making that kind of content would be creating a lot of work for myself that, quite frankly, I don't think I want to do. But I do like dropping little nuggets, I suppose, every now and again. All I wanted to do was challenge or get you to think about your mindset when it comes to drawing and getting better at things. That it's not just technique based, but that your body has ways it wants to work. And the more you understand and lean into it, the easier things become. If you think this has helped, changed how you think about drawing, and it makes you just want to explore it further, I'd really recommend getting a copy of Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain. And also just not putting so much pressure on yourself. The skill will come in time. It's just a matter of consistency. Hell, maybe I'm saying this just as much for me as I am for you. I'm still working on my manga, but I just felt the need to talk about this because I did. So, yeah, I guess I did. Like and subscribe if you want to see more. It does actually help. Yeah, cool.